Blessings, blessings, people, blessings, you beautiful souls. All right, so we are back. We are back with the astrological analysis. I just wanted to follow up with the last video that I did about Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. This won't be too long. I just want to show you a couple of different charts just so that you can see, how somebody can be taken out in their chart. Okay. So let's get straight into it. I'm going to make this short and sweet. And just as a reminder, when I do these natal chart interpretations, I try not to dive too deep with like the language that I use because I do understand and overstand that everybody watching this, or majority of the people, I don't want to generalize, but I know there are a lot of people who are watching this who won't understand certain meanings of the natal chart. So I try not to use lingo that's going to get you lost. I don't want to get you lost in the lingo. I like that, lost in the lingo. All right, I'm gonna repeat it. I don't want to get you lost in the lingo. So I try to say things that are so basic that like a first grader can understand. So these natal chart interpretations that I do for the public on YouTube are just very basic so that everybody can digest the information. Okay. Okay. So Abraham Lincoln was assassinated on April the 14th, 1865. And this one's really easy to see. On that day, he had Pluto, right, in his fourth house, squaring his ascendant at the 22nd degree. The 22nd degree is a degree that is, like I mentioned in the other video, associated with, you know, um, to be unalive or to unalive somebody else, right? And his ascendant was actually a degree away from his sun, right? And your sun represents like your physical body, like your avatar, like your identification. So not only did he have Pluto that was squaring his ascendant, he had Pluto that was squaring his sun. And that is your ascendant is your I am energy, the manifestation of your soul, and your sun is your avatar, like your physical identity. So to have Pluto, um, and Pluto was at the 12th degree. The 12th degree represents, Neptune represents Pisces, and Pisces, like I said in the other video, represents like physical death as well, you going into the afterlife. So to have Pluto so close to Mercury, and Mercury was at the 13th degree, right? And the 13th degree is represented by Aries. That's a Mars degree. So gunfire, you know, um, bullets, right? And this was a this assassination was like paid for hire, like somebody hired this assassin to go and do it because this Pluto is in Taurus, right? And the Pluto's in the fourth house. So the fourth house, like I mentioned in the other video, can talk about like your security, right? And this was so close to the IC, which is like usually the lowest, point in the natal chart because it's opposed to midheaven, right? So the fact that you have Pluto and Mercury that was squaring his ascendant and his sun, you know, that's a wrap. You also have Venus, right? You have Venus that was right here conjuncting um, Lilith. Let me see what time he was assassinated. Oh yeah, Abraham Lincoln was shot at nighttime. Okay, and Lilith is a representation of the night, right? And this Lilith was at the 26th degree. The 26th degree is a Taurus degree, and it was conjunct Venus. Venus is represents Taurus. Venus was at the 25th degree, right? The 25th degree is again a Aries degree representing violence, to tear something down, right? It can also mean to build something up, right? It's a duality, but in this case, to tear something down, bullets, bloodshed, right? And it was conjunct Lilith. So this took place at night, right? And it was for higher, Lilith at the 26th degree. right? It was for a gunman for hire. Lilith is in uh, Saturn. Saturn is really whenever you have this type of energy that takes place in Saturn, Saturn is a restrictive energy. So it's like it usually means like confinement. So it's I believe he was shot in a theater at nighttime. And again, Lilith represents the nighttime, right? She's represents like a demon. Um, but in this case represents nighttime. So he was restricted at nighttime in a way that where he couldn't get away. And they were they already knew this because that's why they hired the assassin to come and take, for this to take place. And you also had Venus that was squaring this energy that was squaring his ascendant, right? And his sun was in Venus at the 23rd degree. The 23rd degree represents Uranus, right? Groups of people, big businesses, corporations. He also had, let me see one second what. Yeah, so Lilith was also conjunct his sun. Lilith was at I'm sorry, the transiting Lilith, not Lilith, Juno. The transiting Juno was at the 27th degree. The 27th degree is a Mercury degree. Not only conjunct his palace, which means that, this was a very calculated thing. Palace is very good at recognizing patterns, like to the T. Like I know where you're gonna be at what time. I've been watching you move. So this was a betrayal. This was a betrayal. And you had Juno in Aquarius that was conjunct his sun. So the people that targeted him it wasn't just one person. It was, I guess you can say, a conglomerate, a group. And his the ruler of Aquarius, the modern day ruler, was in is in his 10th house, right? In his 10th house in Scorpio and a Pluto deacon. Of course, Scorpio Pluto represents death. And the fact that, you had his ascendant and his sun in Aquarius, is of course his ascendant is at the 22nd degree. If you want to get a clearer picture on, what's happening, then you take a look at the Lord of this house, which is the ruler of the sign, and it's Uranus, right? So Uranus was here in a public arena in the 10th house. This took place in a public arena, right? Even if you were to look at um, the ancient ruler, Saturn, right? Saturn was in the 11th house in Sagittarius, right? And a Jupiter deacon, just expanding the type of restriction and boundaries. And it was so close to Priapus, that repressed male energy. His Priapus is retrograding. So this was done, by, again, foreign entities, foreign powers. And of course, you have his Saturn that's only 3 degrees away from his Neptune, right? And he was in his ninth house perfection year. So his ninth house perfection year, you have um, Mars, right? And a Mercury deacon at a 25th degree. Again, the 25th degree is a Mars degree, an Aries degree, gunfire, bloodshed. And a Mercury deacon, it was communication being done for this to happen. This was the person who did it, of course, traveled to him, right? Mercury is that short distance travel. And you had Saturn that was conjunct his Mars, again, restriction. And you had Saturn conjunct the transiting Saturn conjuncting the transiting North Node. This was a fated encounter. This was a fated encounter. So again, it's really easy to see on um, in Abraham Lincoln's chart. Of course, you had Lilith creeping up in here. Lilith was at the first degree, bloodshed, right? So, and this took place at nighttime again. And the fact that he was in his ninth house perfection year, of course, the ninth house represents foreign affairs and it's in a Libra sign. So it was like a contract from these foreign entities, from these foreign powers, open enemies, right? This was done by open enemies. Okay. So that's, like I said, I'm not going to make this too short. So let's go ahead and move on to the next chart. So on this chart, okay, so on JFK's chart, there's a lot to say, but again, I'm going to make this brief and simple. Okay, so he had the transiting Jupiter, and this is something similar that I saw in his chart and Donald Trump's chart. I just want to point that out. This is just John F. Kennedy. Mm-mm-mm. I believe it was this chart. One second. All right, there we go. I had to switch up the date. So this is something similar that I saw in JFK's chart and Donald Trump's chart. So right now, Donald Trump has, well, I'll show you about the placement with this Jupiter. He has the transiting Jupiter retrograding. And the thing I didn't mention in other videos, when Jupiter is retrograding, it still can be beneficial, but it's more, Jupiter acts more like pessimistic, right? It's kind of harder to get your blessings. And I believe that Kamala Harris has Jupiter in her first house in retrograding. That's why she has so much negative feedback online right now, or a lot of the stuff that's being, talked about her character is kind of negative. But anyway, focusing on this. So, first of all, JFK was in his 11th house perfection year. Okay, in his 11th house, you can see that he has Pluto that's conjunct his moon, and his moon is at the first degree. Okay, the first degree again, bloodshed, gunfire, bullets, bombs, like all, think Mars, think Shango, think God of War, that type of thing. All right, so also the transiting North Node was conjunct his Pluto, a fated moment, like we saw with Abraham Lincoln, because Abraham Lincoln was in his ninth house perfection year, and the transiting North Node was conjunct his Mars, a fated moment. All right. So the fact that he's in his 11th house perfection year, right, bringing about your fate. Matter of fact, one second. Let me go back to Abraham Lincoln's chart just so I can show you something. So on the day that Abraham Lincoln was taken out, you had the true node that was entering Scorpio, right? Scorpio represents physical death, but the North Node was conjunct his North Node. Y'all, he was going through his North Node return, the epitome of a fated moment, right? And his South Node was conjunct his Sun. right? So you can't get more, it was destined for this to happen to him. His North Node was conjunct his Mars, and he was in his ninth house perfection year, but it was also conjunct his North Node, and his North Node was in his 10th house, right? And it was conjunct Uranus, bringing about sudden changes. And Uranus was in a Pluto deacon to his, like, it was death, like it wasn't like expecting this to happen. He was in this, theater watching a play, homie roll up, boom, boom, pow, you know, and a Pluto deacon, that's death, that's physical death. And the Uranus was so close to his North Node with the orb of three separating, right? It couldn't get away from that because it was too quick, too fast of an encounter for him to get away from it, right? Okay. All right. And with Abe Lincoln, you also had Pluto, the transiting Pluto, right? Which was at the 12th degree again, welcoming him to death. It was opposing Uranus, y'all. It was opposing Uranus at the ninth degree, right? Again, bringing in foreign powers. And then he was in the ninth house perfection year, open enemies. The hired gunman was hired by these foreign entities, y'all, that some can say control the United States. But anyway, I don't want to get myself in trouble. Let's move on. Let's go back to JFK. Right, JFK, back to JFK. So, like I said, JFK was in his 11th house perfection year. And I already talked about the situation that was going on. He had Saturn, in a Neptune deacon, Saturn at the 23rd degree, big business, big corporations. Why would I say big corporations? What was JFK trying to do? He's trying to shut down the Federal Reserve, right? Pluto at the second degree is not only talking about his physical death, but what he was focused on in this year. Pluto is represents like that phoenix energy to tear something down to rebuild it back up again. And it's at the second degree. Second degree represents financial matters, money. He was trying to tear down the Federal Reserve, that second degree, and build it back up again. Right? No, no, no. They didn't like that. They didn't like that. So the fact that you had Saturn at the 23rd degree in Neptune, it was done in a very public stage, very public arena, y'all. Saturn also represents presidents, right? Let me bring in these. Oh, oops. Let me bring in these transits real quick. So again, you had the North Node in the mix, but you also had the North Node was at the 11th degree. It was opposing his natal North Node at the 15th degree in Capricorn. Again, a fated moment because you had the transiting South Node that was conjunct his North Node. You know what you call that? That's a reverse nodal return, y'all. He was in his reverse nodal return. Abraham Lincoln was in his North Node return. JFK was in his reverse nodal return. You can't get this is the epitome of a fated moment, right? Okay. And the fact that it was, if you look at the ruler of the Lord of his 11th house, it was in his 11th house, conjunct Pluto. Mm, mm. But also the fact that you had this North Node opposing his North Node reverse node of return. And this was Again, done in a public arena, Capricorn, public sphere, fifth house, his physical identity. Hmm. Also, you had Neptune, the transiting Neptune that was square Uranus, right? This Uranus is at the 22nd degree. And you had Saturn that was conjunct his Uranus, bringing about that restriction. Can't go nowhere. You can't go nowhere, right? What degree was Saturn? Saturn was at that 17th degree. That's a Leo degree, your physical identity. I hope this is, I'm like I said, I'm trying to keep this super basic for y'all so that everybody can go, oh, okay, I get it. Right. You also had Jupiter that was square his natal Pluto. And Jupiter retrograding was conjunct his sun. His sun is at the eighth degree. The eighth degree is a degree of death. Pluto, Scorpio. He was a Mercury, um, what do you call it? He was a, it's skipping my mind right now. Um, sorry, y'all. He had a Mercury Cazimi, which is why he was fantastic with his words. And for somebody to be born with a Cazimi in their chart is, y'all, I read a lot of charts. This is a rare placement to have. I don't really see many people that have Cazimis in their natal chart. I mean, I have one in my chart, not to toot my own horn. I have a Mars Cazimi, but he has a Mercury Cazimi. Who else had a Mercury Cazimi? He was a great speaker. Alan Watts had a Mercury Cazimi, I believe. Just great with his words, y'all. That's why he was so influential with his words. And his words could be seen as dangerous, right? He influenced people with his words. He caused, people to initiate things just by the voice, just by his voice, because he had his son that was conjunct his Mars, right? With the orb of six. But you also had Jupiter retrograding that was conjunct his Mars, right? Mars at the second degree. Foreign powers, y'all. Foreign powers took him out, took him out, took him out. Mars, Jupiter was at the ninth degree, right? That was conjunct his Venus with an orb of eight. And the fact that he had Jupiter in the eighth house and this was taking place, with Jupiter conjunct his sun, the eighth house is the house of death, physical death, y'all. And Aries is your I am energy, your essence, your soul incarnate energy, right? And all of this was taking place in a Mars deacon, all right? You also had Neptune's where Lilith, Neptune's where Lilith. Um, mm. You also have the sun that will square his ascendant, the transiting sun right here, squaring his ascendant. And the sun was in Scorpio, death, physical death, squaring his ascendant. His ascendant is at the third degree. Third degree represents cars. traveling. What was he doing when he passed away? He was traveling in a car. His ascendant is in a Mercury deacon. Cars, traveling. You also had in the sun squaring Uranus, 22nd degree. And the fact that this was taking place in Aquarius, Aquarius is like a very like humanitarian sign, like large groups of people. And this took place all of a sudden and in front of like large crowds, large groups of people. And he was, in a parade, I believe, like a very humanitarian. Type of act. You also had the sun square, I already went, sun square Uranus, the moon square Jupiter, all right? And Jupiter's at the eighth degree in Venus, the ninth house, foreign powers. But I personally believe that this could have been a betrayal, like the fact that you have the moon at the first degree, so close to like sitting right on top of Juno. Listen, I'm not saying it was the fact that it's somebody with displacement that you was betrayed by somebody you love, my G. You was betrayed by somebody you love. And the fact that it was where Jupiter and a Venus deacon at the eighth degree, again, eighth degree represents death. And it's in a Venus deacon in Taurus. Yep, this was done by foreign powers, ninth house, foreign powers, a militia, a mafia that runs the United States. Mercury was where ascended. Mercury in the fourth house in Sagittarius. Sagittarius usually rules the ninth house, foreign entities, foreign powers, squaring his ascendant. Third degree, he was in a car, boom, 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 moving. Mercury was at the what? Eighth degree, physical death. I mean, you can see it so many times. Once you see something once, this is what I call like a gridlock of death. When somebody has so many placements that just kind of point to death, I call it a gridlock of death because it's usually inescapable, especially if Uranus is involved. And Uranus is at the 22nd, his natal Uranus is at the 22nd degree. I mean, it was no escaping this. But as we move along, you'll get to see what I mean by this. You also had Mars squaring Chiron. Mars was at the 19th degree, open enemies, right? Squaring Chiron in the seventh house, the house of open enemies. Chiron's at the 26th degree in a Pluto deacon, paid for death, paid for hire. Pisces, welcoming to death, gridlock of death, y'all. I mean, the fact that you have Priapus at the eighth degree, all right? These your open enemies is like they are like very aggressive. Like Priapus is like that repressed male energy, like insecure man wanted to take him out because they were afraid of his power. And you had Chiron that was sitting right on top of Priapus. Chiron was at the, what was that? 10th degree, right? Heartbreak in a very public arena. Like his death was done in a very public arena. Priapus, right? And a Neptune deacon, again, death, gridlock of death. Um, I hope I'm doing good, not going too deep in these, so everybody can understand. And Venus was square Chiron as well. think that's one I just went over, but Venus, where Chiron, Venus was at the uh 20th degree. 20th degree is a higher degree, it's a higher Scorpio degree, right? Bringing about death. Same thing. Same thing. You also had Saturn that was square Jupiter, right? Bringing about that restriction, right? He couldn't go anywhere. He was in a large group of people. He was in a car, a moving vehicle, right? You had Saturn at the 17th degree, right? It was like it was a parade that was like centered around him. The 17th degree is a Leo degree, all eyes on me, right? He couldn't go nowhere. He was in a car. Restriction, squaring your Jupiter at the 8th degree, right? And again, the fact that you have Saturn so close to Uranus, yeah. And you had Saturn that was transiting over Mercury deacon, right? Restriction in a car in a large group of people, in front of a large group of people, doing a service to the people. I'll just quickly move through the rest of these. You had um, Pluto, that was quincunxus Pluto, right? Mm, I'm sorry, quintile. You have Pluto that was quintile, his Pluto right here. He felt it coming. He definitely felt this coming. It's probably a lot of first time a lot of y'all probably heard of quintile. Usually it's a positive aspect, but mm, that's why his guard was down. It's one of those things where it's like, can I escape this, or is this fit? Is like, is this inescapable? You know, like you feel in the back of your head, but you kind of put it to rest, but because you had to do like the service to the people. This was like, man, he was like really being stalked. You know, having Pluto in your first house, like that brings about stalkers. That brings about people obsessed with your every move. Like, what are you doing? You know. Mm. He had the North Node that was square his sun. Transiting North Node that was square his sun. Transiting North Node again was at the 11th degree in the 11th house that was square his sun at the 8th degree. Faded moment. North Node squaring his Mercury. Saturn conjunct Uranus. I already went over that one. I'm just going down a list of things I wrote here for this video. Jupiter retrograde conjunct his sun. I already went over that. Neptune by quintile his sun. Juno opposed Jupiter. Juno, Juno, where you at? Opposes Jupiter. Juno was at the 8th degree, representing death. Opposes Jupiter at the 8th degree. Y'all, this was a betrayal. Juno was in hovering it over a Pluto deacon. This was a betrayal. Juno was in Scorpio, physical death. This was a betrayal by somebody he loved, somebody who knew he was going to be in this moving vehicle, somebody that could have been in the moving vehicle with him. Uh-oh, let me move on to the next one. Um, invest, last but not least, Vesta. Vesta was not only conjunct, his Mercury, but it was squaring his ascendant, right? Oh Lord. Yeah. The fact that you had Vesta so close to Mercury, right? This was somebody that was definitely committed on making this thing happen, right? Vesta square his ascendant, you know, you could say that the fact that he was out there in that moving car, he saw it as a higher purpose. And I bet behind the scenes, he actually had like some foreign like negotiations going on that he probably thought that was going to turn out well. I haven't even looked into it, but I bet if you do, he was probably talking to like foreign people to, change things for the better. Um, this could have been a number of things. I believe around that time it was like something going on with the moon, like in competition with something with the moon. So he was really like dedicated, like committed to doing something that was larger to him, right? And the fact that his Vesta was so close to Mercury and Sagittarius, he was definitely in talks with, these foreign entities trying to get something in play, like a higher purpose for humanity. But it was to square his ascendant at third degree. So those talks did not go well, right? Third degree represents communication, right? With these foreign entities, but those did not go well, which brought about this sudden passing of him, right? Uranus was at the ninth degree, conjunct his ascendant. Uranus, the ninth degree, that's the ninth degree represents these foreign powers, the same foreign powers that he was speaking to. Uranus was conjunct Pluto. Talks didn't go well. Boom, boom, pow. We got to get you out of here because you're not in line with what we are trying to do. But we go get some local people to take you out, though. We go get some local people to take you out in a large group of people while you're doing a service where you're constricted. You can't go nowhere, and it's going to involve somebody in your camp, right? Somebody that you really trust, that who knows everything that's going on. But we go ahead and pay them off so that they can go ahead and play by the rules. Even if you were to look at his son, JFK Jr., right? Let's pull up his chart real quick. Hopefully, I got enough time. JFK Jr., let me get these dates right. One second. Let me change the dates just so I can show you how you can see death in his chart. So on July the 16th, 1999, JFK Jr. was assassinated. The reason I say assassinated is because let's get straight into it. He had the transiting Pluto that was conjunct his sun. He was in his fourth house perfection year. There are not a lot of people that make it out of their fourth house perfection year. Now, I nervously say that because I'm currently in my fourth house perfection year, but he was 39 years of age, right? Fourth house perfection year. Same thing like the 27 club. 27 club is the seventh house. A lot of people don't make it out that year. You were at the lowest point in your life. A lot of shit happens to people in their fourth house perfection year, right? And his son was here, his physical identity, right? So we have Pluto that was transiting. Pluto's at the eighth degree physical death that was conjunct his sun, right? And again, Sagittarius, this dude was taken out by foreign powers. They didn't want him rising up. He had the same blood as his daddy, OG Kennedy, right? I don't know how much time I got left, so I'm gonna speed through these. I'm doing this Zoom free 45-minute video. So you have Pluto that was square his Pluto, y'all. His Pluto was at the eighth degree. The transiting Pluto was at the eighth degree, gridlock of death, right? You had Lilith at the fourth degree that was square his Pluto. Lilith represents nighttime. He was killed at nighttime. The fourth degree represents Cancer, water. He was killed over water. Lilith was conjunct Pluto, right? Physical death over water. This happened on top of your sun, right? Your physical identity in a fourth house in the sign of Sagittarius, you were killed over water, right? Your physical avatar was taken out over water at nighttime by foreign entities. assassination. Lilith square Pluto, right? Again, Pluto in his first house, eighth degree. Your incarnate energy. He had Pluto that was conjunct his North Node, right? With the orbit three. It was a fated encounter. Once again, Pluto conjunct his ascendant, fated encounter. You can't get away from this, right? And another indication that this was a fated encounter is the fact that you have Pluto squaring his ascendant, right? You can't get away from that, right? You had Venus at the first degree, representing fire. Matter of fact, did this plane catch on fire? Was it a malfunction? Let me look this up real quick. Actually, I'm not gonna look it up because that might be cheating. I'm gonna look it up after. uh, but I would have to say if it was some type of malfunction to his plane, it would have been like some type of fire, right? And you had um, Venus that was conjunct the moon over his Pluto in the eighth house, his security, right? And the moon was conjunct Uranus in his 12th house, Uranus at the 25th degree, hidden enemies, not so much the open enemies, but this was hidden enemies, right? You also had Pallas, Athena, that was square his Pluto. Pallas was at the 12th degree. Some of these I'm just freestyling. I'm just looking up right now, just some things that I'm seeing. You have Pallas, again, that was squaring his Pluto. Pallas was over his midheaven. Pallas was at the 12th degree. So Pallas was opposing Pluto, right? This was a very calculated maneuver. Very, very calculated. Gemini. Gemini represents automobiles, engines. So you have Pallas at the, I'm sorry, I keep looking at this degree. I keep have so many things in my mind, I keep forgetting a degree. Pallas is at the 12th degree. Again, 12th degree represents water, Pisces, ocean, right? Conjunct his midheaven. His midheaven was at the ninth degree. That's a Mercurian degree. I'm sorry. It was in the Mercury decan at the ninth degree, right? Engine failure, just expanding, right? Bring in more emphasis. The ninth degree is a Jupiter degree, just bring in emphasizing that engine failure, right? But since it's Pallas there, somebody was, this was a very calculated, Pallas noticed patterns, right? Somebody knew exactly where he was going to be to make that engine fail. And the fact that you had Pallas that was squaring his Pluto in the eighth house, it was done in a way that would bring about his physical death, especially since you have Pluto that's so close to his ascendant in his North Node, right? South Node in Pisces. And if his South Node is at the 11th degree, that means the South Node squares his midheaven, and the South Node was squaring Pallas. The nodes of the moon control your fate, y'all. You had the moon. I already went over that. The moon conjunct Pluto. The moon represents water. Conjunct Pluto. Too close. The moon's at the first degree. So orb is 7. You had Uranus at the 15th degree, retrograding, that was squaring his Neptune, right? Neptune in the third degree. Neptune at the ninth degree in the third house, right? And a Pluto deacon, physical death. Neptune welcomes you to death, third degree. Engine, right? Has something to do with the engine and a sign of Scorpio, physical death. But you had Mars that was conjunct. Mars was at the fourth degree. Mars at the fourth degree represents water, right? That was conjunct his Neptune. I had to be some type of fire. It had to be some type of malfunction that caused like an explosion or fire because Mars wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case. I'm gonna look it up afterwards. I could be wrong, but astrology never lies. So this was a engine failure, right? Bringing about his physical death. You had Saturn at the 15th degree. That was almost Mars was almost opposing Saturn, but you did have Saturn that was opposing his Neptune, bringing about that restriction, right? The restriction in an earth sign means that you were over water, like you couldn't, there was no way you could have land in the ground, on the ground. That was restricted from you. It was it was a confinement over the water, right? You have nothing, no luminaries in this ninth house that's preventing that. Let me hurry up and move through this. But the fact that you have Neptune at the 15th degree, right? The 15th degree is a Mercurian degree. And in Aquarius, Aquarius represents airplanes, aviation, right? And it was squaring his Neptune, foreign waters, and Scorpio. All of this water. Scorpio also represents the water, but more so, Scorpio's like fixed water, so like ice. So I wonder what type of waters he was over. These had to be some cold waters, some very, very cold waters. It gives you an idea of what land he was close to. Neptune at the third degree, squaring his Neptune at the ninth degree, right? Neptune in the third degree in Aquarius, right? Death in a plane, right? In the house of bad omens, the sixth house. And again, his Neptune is so close to his palace, very calculated, done in public. Squaring his Neptune, right? Aviation, Aquarius, squaring his Neptune in the third house. The third house represents engine failure, and the sign of Scorpio, bringing about his physical death. You got Mars in here, conjuncting, right? Bringing about some type of explosion or fire. And the fact that you have Neptune so close to Mercury right here, too close to each other, right? Death by engine. Neptune was at the 13th degree. I'm sorry, Mercury's at the 13th degree. That's a physical fire to an engine and a Neptune deacon resulting in death. You had the sun, the transiting sun that was happened to be at the 22nd degree when this happened. That was conjunct Mars at the 18th degree. 18th degree, Mars is retrograding. That's something that you can't escape. 18th degree, shout out to Nicholas Stoyanovich, who came up with his degree theory. 18th degree, after he, came up with this theory based on empirical study, empirical evidence, he said, Nicholas Stoyanovich, rest in peace, said that the 18th degree is something that you can't escape, whether it be a physical illness, like a bizarre accident, getting hit by a car, hit by a bus. Like this freak accident was in a plane. Sun 22nd degree, shedding light on this in a Cancer sign over water, right? And you had um Mars at the 18th degree, conjunct Lilith at the 22nd degree. This had to happen at nighttime, y'all. It happened at nighttime. Lilith was in the sign of Neptune over water, bringing about your physical death. The sun, I already went over that. Sun conjunct Lilith, nighttime, death over water, right? And then transiting Lilith, again, same thing, was conjunct Pluto over the sun. Same situation, same exact situation, death over water. So you can see the same thing happening all over the chart. And to finish this off, let me just bring back up Donald Trump's chart. So Donald Trump's chart, Donald Trump is in his seventh house perfection year, right? Seventh house perfection year. This is the transits for the day of the election. You're going to have Pluto going into Aquarius into his seventh house on the 20th, right? Hidden enemies. Now, if he were to pass away, I would not be surprised if it was done in, something that he couldn't escape, like an airplane, helicopter. Same thing that JFK had, Sun or Jupiter retrograding conjunct the sun, and his sun is at the 22nd degree. His sun is 2 degrees away from the North Node, a fated encounter, a fated moment, right? You're going to have the moon opposing his sun. You're going to have Venus opposing his sun. Venus is going to be at the 22nd degree. So I won't say it. I mean, it's almost a gridlock of death. If he was in his 11th house perfection year, that would be, you know, if it didn't happen, this year, it would happen in 1, 2, 3, 4 years, right? But I mean, mm, I'm not gonna say it's gonna happen to Donald Trump, but somebody with this lineup, it's scary hours. That's all I'm gonna say. Scary hours. Um, Let me see if there's anything I want to say before I finish this. So another thing that I would say with Donald Trump is the fact that, with JFK had, let me look here, Neptune square Uranus, right? And Donald Trump has what is this? Neptune square his sun, Neptune squaring his moon, Neptune squaring Neptune, and then Neptune squaring Uranus and Neptune opposing Neptune, right? And where is Neptune going to be? In Pisces, right? So if this were to happen, I wouldn't be surprised if it were to happen over water on his way home. Nobody would expect it. It would definitely be done in a public arena, right? But if Donald Trump were to pass, I just see it happening in some type of something that he can't escape, like a moving vehicle or, some type of airplanes, something. Yeah. I mean, you got Neptune or you have uh Jupiter. That's going to be, let me see. If I were to give you, let me look at something real quick. Yeah, but again, I mean, the 21st of November, you have like a window from like the 21st of November going on to like, you know, January, but really the beginning of December that I would say it's that's the time that he should be, that's the time that he should be careful, right? Because on that day, Pluto is going to be at the 0 degree, like just entering into his seventh house, right? And Mars is going to be, yeah, so Pluto's going to be opposing Mars, and that's going to be, so Mars is going to be conjunct Pluto in his first house. Again, for a lot of reasons, this is for entertainment purposes only. I'm not saying anything's going to happen to anybody, but listen to the words I said. I really appreciate y'all stopping by, checking out this astrological analysis. If you like this video, please be sure to like, share, follow. I'll see you all for the next one. Take care of yourself. Peace.